everybody. Welcome to episode 5 of In My Plant-Based Kitchen. I'm Emma Levez-Laroc. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist and a certified plant-based chef. And this is the day of the week where I invite you into my kitchen to talk nutrition and cooking and all things plant-based. So today, I wanted to address a question that I got in the past week about the question was, where can I get protein on a plant-based diet? And this is something that I feel like there's a lot of information out there about, but it's also a question that I still get all the time. I address it in my classes and or the classes I used to teach. I don't teach anymore, but it was also a concern for a lot of my clients. So I thought it would be worth doing an episode about protein, plant-based protein, a little bit about animal-based protein, and talk about where you can get good sources of protein on a plant-based diet and some of the concerns that I hear about regularly. So I'm going to wrap that question into a few others and just talk generally about protein today. And then we are going to do a little, one of my favorite high protein snacks that also happens to be high in fiber and other wonderful things. So you can see around me, I've gathered some protein-rich foods. So let's dive right in. So first of all, what is protein and what is it used for in our bodies? Protein is one of the 3 macronutrients, fat and carbohydrates, of course, being the other 2. It is an incredibly important nutrient for us, but we do tend to put a lot of emphasis on it in our society, thinking that it's you know, this big important superhero. And it is important because what it does for us is it helps us to build and maintain and repair our body's tissues. So of course, and that's just, you know, sort of its general role, but it does a lot of important things in our bodies. But it's not any more important than the other macronutrients. And we tend to give it a lot of, make it a superstar, a shining star, a focus, when it doesn't probably necessarily warrant all that attention. There are 20 different amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. 11 of those our bodies make for itself. 9 of them, it doesn't. So we have to get those from our diet on a regular basis. Basically, all foods have some protein. Vegetables, nuts and seeds, legumes, whole grains, all foods have some proteins. And there are actually some advantages of getting your protein from plant foods, because the plant foods that have a lot of protein, I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but the plant foods that have a lot of protein also have a lot of fiber and vitamins and minerals and other really beneficial components to them. If you think about it, one of the things I like to talk about is, and I can't even remember where I initially sort of heard this concept, but it was probably one of the plant-based doctors talking about it. But the biggest animals on this planet, cows, giraffes, elephants, even gorillas, even though they eat some bugs, I think, but these animals are primarily vegan, plant-based. They eat all plant foods, and they manage to get enough protein to build these big, huge bodies, healthy bodies out of plants, and we can do the same thing. With the traditional Western diet, as I mentioned, we eat a lot of extra protein. We eat probably twice the amount of protein generally, and it's partly because of that emphasis that I spoke about. Than we need to. And when it comes from animal products, that's not necessarily the best, a great thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about why in a moment. But first, let's talk about, so what are some good sources of plant-based protein? I gathered a few around me here today, just from my pantry. I just pulled out a few things. So beans and legumes. So we've got, you know, canned beans, wonderful, convenient thing to keep on hand. I usually always have some black beans and some chickpeas on hand, but also dried. I have some dried black beans, some aduki beans, some green lentils here. I've got some red lentils. So any kind of beans that you like or maybe want to experiment with, these are all really wonderful sources of plant-based protein. Whole grains. Quinoa is a shining star in this area. Quinoa, if you like quinoa, because it has all of the amino acids, the essential amino acids, in about the same ratio. And so that's a really great grain to include in your diet as a source of protein. Nuts, seeds, nut butters. So we've got some peanut butter here, some walnuts, pecans, chia seeds. Again, another really good source of plant-based protein because of the ratio of essential amino acids that it holds. So all of those things, also, of course, some vegetables. Fruit is not, I mean, fruit does have some protein, but it's not a really high source of protein. But almost all the other categories in a plant-based diet have a good amount of protein. And the really, really important key message to take away from this there are two things. If you are getting enough calories with a reasonably healthy diet, not if you're getting enough calories from, pop and chips kind of thing, but if you're getting enough calories on a reasonably healthy plant-based diet, then you'll be getting enough protein. If you're on a really calorie restricted diet, if you're on because you're trying to lose weight or for some other reason, that might be a time when you would be concerned about your protein intake. There are also times in a person's life, like during pregnancy, or if you're healing from surgery, or if you're a strength athlete that is constantly possibly damaging your muscles as you're needing to rebuild your muscles after training sessions. Those are some times when you might need a bit more protein. But I'm going to include a couple of links below that if you are at all concerned about your protein intake, you can go and have a look at those. They're to do with plant-based protein and how much you need and if you're getting enough and all that stuff. So if you want to investigate more, I highly suggest that you do that. Education is, or knowledge is power, right? So it's a good thing to inform yourself about. And I will include those below. The other really important key thing that I wanted to mention, so one, making sure you're getting enough calories, which isn't a problem for most of us, and two, making sure that you're eating a variety, because there are different levels of amino acids in different foods. So if you're eating a good variety over the course of a day or a week, then you really don't have to get too concerned and worry about it. So this brings me to the next question. Do you need to combine foods together to get what are called complete proteins? This is a long-standing myth from several decades ago. I won't go into the history of where it came from, but it basically has been thoroughly debunked. Our bodies are much smarter than we give them credit for sometimes. And so what happens, and this comes into eating a variety of foods, is when we eat a variety of foods that are rich in proteins, even if the essential amino acid levels are not, sort of on par, and they don't have all like they might have more of one amino acid than another, for example, our bodies break the proteins down into their amino acids as through the digestive system, and then they build them back up into the proteins we need for functions in our bodies. So as long as we're eating, like I said, over the course of a day or a week, a variety of plant-based foods, lots of different legumes and nuts and seeds and whole grains and vegetables, then we will be absolutely fine. And you don't need to worry about combining rice and beans at one meal and, the different combinations that would give you a full complement of the amino acids. Our bodies are smart and they'll figure that out for us. Next question, the next part of the question was, can you become strong and healthy with on a strict plant-based protein diet, so without any animal protein? And of course, the answer is absolutely. If you haven't seen it, there was a wonderful documentary a few years ago, Game Changers, that talked about athletes, elite athletes, not just active people, but elite athletes who were gravitating towards a plant-based diet because of the ability of plant-based foods to reduce inflammation and help you to heal faster. And so all of this, if you're an athlete at that level, of course, you're going to be looking at your diet and planning, and all of us should be paying attention to that anyway. Kids and teenagers, and when you're pregnant or healing from surgery, like I mentioned, these are times when you want to do a little bit more planning with your diet and know that you're getting the nutrients that you need. But it's really very easy. Again, just coming back down to that principle of making sure that you're eating a variety of healthy foods over a time period. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is the importance of distinguishing between plant and animal proteins. So I've already emphasized that we can get enough protein from plant foods. Animal foods have been sort of promoted as a really important source of protein. They're shining star because they're rich in protein, which they are. The rub comes when you think about what animal protein comes along with. So along with the protein, you get dietary cholesterol and saturated fat, which we don't want too much of in our diet, and arguably any at all if we can avoid it. These are things that we know contribute to heart disease and atherosclerosis and so on. Also things like high iron levels. So for some of us, for some people, iron, you struggle to get enough iron, you're concerned about where to get your iron. And we'll talk about that in another episode maybe. But for a lot of people who are eating a lot of especially red meat, you're getting a lot of extra iron, and that's not good for you either. It causes a lot of inflammation and possibly increases disease risk as well. The other thing is when meat is heated, it produces chemicals like heterocyclic amines and polyaromatic hydrocarbons and these fancy names that basically are things that promote cancer risk and diseases. So along with the protein, we're getting a lot of other things that maybe we don't want in our diet. Whereas with plant proteins, the baggage you're getting is all good baggage. It's the fiber, it's the vitamins and the minerals and phytochemicals that are going to help us reduce inflammation and be healthier. So I hope that kind of, if you're at all worried about protein, kind of puts your mind at rest. Like I said, I will link to some more resources if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about protein. And I'm going to share some of my favorite recipes. I know that beans, sometimes, especially for people who are new to a plant-based diet, beans and legumes are a harder thing to get in. And actually, I wanted to mention as well, it's not just beans and legumes, but tofu, tempeh, edamame. If you like those foods, those are, of course, part of the legume family as well. So they're a great way. And soy is a really good source of plant-based protein as well. So those are great things to include in your diet and experiment with and become comfortable with. But let's get to the cooking portion of this. Today, I wanted to show you one of my sort of go-tos. This is, it's super simple, which is what I'm trying to keep these little, demo sessions in these episodes. That's what I'm trying to keep them simple. So they're fast. You can use them a number of ways. So what we're going to do is we're going to do stovetop chickpeas. And I think while I'm talking, I'm actually going to put this on the stove to heat up a little bit because this is a little bit noisy. So while we're preparing it, I'll just heat the pan up on the stove because the heating process is really important when you are cooking with not very much or none at all oil. No oil, or not very much or none at all anyway. But basically, you can do roasted chickpeas lots of ways. You can do them roasted in the oven. I love this method because you don't have to turn the oven on in the summer. And it's really, really fast. It's just so quick. I eat these a lot as snacks. So if I'm hungry in the afternoon and I really feel like something that's going to stick to my stomach, I will make up some of these roasted chickpeas and have them as a snack. Or they're also great. If you follow my Instagram channel or my Facebook, you will see lots of meal salads that have roasted chickpeas on them. I use them in wraps. I put them onto stir fry sometimes, just sprinkle them everywhere. They're so good for you. They're, of course, a great source of protein. They're a great source of fiber. So they're going to make a meal salad more filling. They're going to help to satiate you. They add a punch of flavor because we're going to load them up with spices. I love them because they are really easy to make different ways. You can just by what spices you're adding. So chickpeas, of course, have a little bit of a nutty flavor, but they don't have a really strong flavor profile. So they lend themselves really well to different spice mixtures and so on. So sometimes I'll make them to be like an Indian inspired curry type flavor. Sometimes I do a Mediterranean type with lots of Italian seasonings. Sometimes I'll do a Mexican one. Sometimes I'll even do a sweet one, like put cinnamon and nutmeg and some of the sweeter spices on. And as you will remember, if you watched, I think it was episode 1 or 2, we talked about spices and their health benefits. So again, adding the spices and herbs to the chickpeas are just increasing their nutritional value some more. So what I'm going to do today is I like using, I mean, I often cook my own chickpeas. And when I do, I will usually make some roasted or toasted chickpeas. But these are really good done in the air fryer, by the way. If you have an air fryer, it's also a great way to do them. But if I don't have any freshly cooked chickpeas, I'll often open up a can. And it's a really good way to do them because you get a really nice consistency. So if you have any problems getting a nice consistency, if you're when you're cooking your beans from, on the in the Instant Pot or something like that, if they're a bit soft, then you can start out with the canned chickpeas. So that's what I have here. I have a can. So I've drained them because you don't want them to be too wet. Tip number 1. You don't want them to be to have too much water while they're cooking, because then they will steam and they'll be softer, which they're still nice to eat, still good. But if they are drier, a little bit drier, you're going to get a crispier result in the end. I am going to add, I don't usually use a recipe. I just pull out the things that I feel like, but I'm going to do the recipe that I'm going to share with you guys today. A little bit of chili powder. If you don't like them too spicy, be careful you don't add things that are too spicy. I just eyeball this, but I'll share the amounts in the recipe. I've got some smoked paprika. I like the color of the, it smells good already. And some garlic powder. I'm going to add a little bit of garlic powder. And then the other things I like to add, I could add a pinch of salt. But the other things I like to add are a little bit of nutritional yeast, if it's a savory one, of course. You don't have to. You can just really, this is whatever you like. But I like adding the nutritional yeast. I find it actually soaks up some of the, because it's still got a little bit of liquid on it. You might be able to, you probably can't see, but they're still a little bit wet, soaks up a little bit of that extra moisture. And I find it helps to make them a little bit crispier. And then the other thing is a little bit of arrowroot powder, arrowroot flour. They're all the same. Or cornstarch, if you have that, similar thing, just a little sprinkle will help to, again, make them a little bit crispier. What you want to make sure is that you do mix them around enough so that you don't have any of that white showing, because that probably won't go away as you're cooking them. And then if you want to do a oil-free, if you want to do an oil-free version, you can do them in a pan like this. So I've got a non-stick pan that I've just been heating up. You do want to make sure that you are, you've heated the pan properly before you put the chickpeas in. If you put it in cold, You might end up with them sticking a little bit. If you're going to use a little bit of oil, you could do that. You don't need much, but it will make them a little bit crispier. So I'm going to do an oil-free version here today. And I probably could have heated up a little bit more. It did feel hot, but if you're wanting to test your pan, you just throw a little bit of water in it, and if it bubbles up and makes a little bubble, then you know it's hot enough. And literally, this is all there is to it. And what I would suggest is just taste it as you go along. You're going to want to get them sizzling away. If you try an oil-free version and you find they're sticking at all, then you can add a tiny little bit of liquid, but I'd be really careful because, like I said, if you add too much liquid, they're just going to steam rather than get crispy. And if you're looking for a bit of a crunchy texture, then you're not going to want to have too much liquid added. I think that's about it. I'm going to cook these up, and I will share a picture at the end of what they look like, as well as the recipe and how I use them. This is a very easy way, if you like them, to get some beans in as a snack. Great snack to send with your kids for school. We're coming up to back to school, back to work. Or like I said, just as an addition to salads, wraps, Buddha bowls, whatever you like. Great thing to add. Other wonderful ways to add more protein to your diet, if you're at all worried about getting enough, getting to use tofu. You can use it so many different ways. I'm going to actually add a link to a post that I did for Vancouver Humane Society about some different ways to use tofu. There's a few recipes and videos on there. You can use it as like the soft tofu in a dessert kind of pudding, chocolate pudding, healthy chocolate pudding, a little bit of maple syrup and cocoa and soft tofu, and it's amazing. Great way to get it into kids if you have reluctant tofu eaters, or doing cubes, doing sauteed cubes, and there are recipes for that. Anyway, there's so many different ideas, and I will share some more ideas over the time. The great thing is, whether we're talking about fiber or protein or vitamins or minerals, it's all the same healthy foods. That's really the overarching message that I love to come back to, is that we can talk about the different nutrients or different components of these foods that are good for certain things, but that at the end of the day, this is a healthy diet that's good for all kinds of different health situations, and it's going to provide you with all the nutrients you need to be healthy and thrive. So happy almost last week of August. It's the second last week of August. Last week of August tomorrow or next week, and then we will be back to school. So I'll be coming in with some soup recipes. So if you have questions, make sure you fill out the form below, linked below. Send them in. I'd love to hear from you. I've been hearing from a lot of you, especially people who've been in my classes or who've been following me on Instagram or Facebook for a while. And I love hearing your feedback. So thank you for sharing that. And I will look forward to chatting with you again next week. And I'll be posting this soon if they're starting to already look. It just takes a few minutes, starting to already look kind of nice and toasty. I can't wait to eat them. Have a great day.